Hello everybody, welcome back for another virtual visit to the aquarium. Thanks for joining us. My name is Nick and I am currently hanging out with my friend Chris. Hey Chris.
Hey.
We are in a part of the building that is behind the scenes, an area where you as visitors might not normally see, actually wouldn't be able to see. And we're hanging out outside our live food room. And I thought that this would be a cool topic to talk about, since one of the questions that we get as educators is, what kind of food do we feed the animals? And is it live food? Is it preserved food? We do have some live food that we feed our animals. And Lucky Chris is the man that manages that. Is that right, Chris?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So Chris, tell us a little bit more about what the deal is with this food room. Why is it so important to have a live food room?
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. Number one, in combination with some of our prepared or frozen diets, which we use throughout the aquarium, this is actually the best way to get the most balanced nutrition to our animals. And probably the best reason we do this is this stuff is all commercially available. You can purchase it and have a vendor send it to you, but by growing it in-house, not only are we saving the aquarium some money on those products, but all the materials that come with it, the boxes, the styrofoam boxes, the plastic bags, all that stuff, the fueling cost and shipping this stuff to us, we avoid all those costs as well, so we're doing it all in-house.
That's amazing. It fits really well with our mission. Obviously, we care a lot about sustainability, reducing our waste. That was a great example of that. Now, we're going to follow Chris into the live food room in a second here and check out some of the different types of things that we grow. Chris, what kind of conditions can we expect in this room?
Yeah, so we try to keep this room pretty warm. All the organisms that we grow in here like it pretty warm. As we walk around the room, you'll see there are individual stations that all have particular temperature, so there may be additional heaters in there to keep things warm. The lights, as you'll see on the algae, are on 24 hours a day to keep that algae growing.
Okay, very cool. All right, so we're going to let Chris lead the way. We're going to follow him into the room. We're going to stop and check out a couple of these systems. I'll be peppering Chris with questions as we go, so we'll give him a chance to catch his breath and answer. But hopefully this should be a really cool experience. So, Chris, lead the way.
All right, come on
Okay.
in. So I thought the first place we'd stop, this is our live algae culture, and it's behind the magic curtain here. As I just mentioned outside, these lights are on 24 hours a day, and what we're doing here is we're actually growing a live algae. It's basically a single cell algae that we can feed to a lot of our organisms. This is a kind of a self-sustaining thing that we do here. We can take a portion of one of these cultures and start a brand new culture from that. So typically we can keep this going indefinitely. So you'll see some of these cultures are really dark. That's a really dense algae product that we can feed off. Some of these cultures are a little bit lighter. So after a few days, as the algae grows and divides, it will become darker, and we'll feed that to our animals. We keep it behind a curtain, obviously, because the lights are so bright. We just don't want to shine light on other things in here.
So Chris, before we completely shut that up, just to clarify a couple things for your average layman, you used a couple words that would be good for us to redefine.
Sure.
So an algae, I think you and I definitely know what that is. That's a plant, right? We're talking about a type of plant.
Sorta.
Yeah.
This is a little bit different. So we're talking about a unicellular organism here. So it does photosynthesize much like a plant. But this is a little bit different. So again, each one of these containers here is just filled with millions and millions and millions of little algae cells.
Okay.
So some people think of algae as like what you get on your sushi and that stuff. This is a little bit different. This is an aquatic planktonic algae.
There you go. And so obviously light is very important because of photosynthesis.
Exactly.
You also use the word culture.
Yeah.
And does that basically mean to grow something?
Exactly. So people might hear that term aquaculture. It's like stuff that's grown in-house, that we can actually reproduce in mass. So some of the stuff that we're going to show you in this room here is all stuff that we can grow and continue to grow, spread out, and feed to our animals.
Very cool. Can you give me like one example of an animal that might eat this algae?
Yeah, so like I said, it's microscopic. It's a tiny little cell. So if you think, people often think about the big animals that we have here in the aquarium, the turtles, the sharks, the mammals, but we also got to feed a lot of our filter feeding organisms. So if you think about the mussels, the clams, the anemones, all those stuff that are in the wild are just pulling in all the plankton. So algae is actually a really good nutritional thing that they can feed on.
That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, so we'll move on to the next section here.
Yeah. These are our copepods. It's another small food item that we can feed to some of our tiniest of animals. They have a great nutritional value, and what's really neat about something like a copepod is that we can do something called gut loading them, which is essentially not only can we feed off the copepod, which is itself nutritious, but we can feed it some of that algae that we just showed you. The algae gets in the gut of the copepod, and then when the animals eat that copepod, not only are they getting the nutrition from the copepod, but they're also getting that nutrition from the algae as well. So essentially it's like stuffing a vitamin into a little microscopic animal to feed to our animals.
Oh, that sort of reminds me of like how some of us trick our pets into eating vitamins, right?
Exactly.
We stick the vitamin inside of something with peanut butter in it, and the pet gets both of them delivered perfectly and doesn't even realize it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, yeah.
Cool. Right on. And so again, copepods, we're talking about planktonic-sized animals. You were mentioning microscopic, very small things.
Yeah, we can actually go into this culture and we can actually count them by using a little drop on a slide, and we can actually count how many are per milliliter. But we're talking, millions and millions and millions per vat that we're looking at right here.
I always think it's amazing, Chris. Copepods, they feed animals that filter feed, is that right? Just like some of the animals that might have been eating that algae that we were just talking about?
Yep.
But they also feed big animals like whales, right?
Yeah, I think that's, another thing people think about plankton only going into these microscopic animals, but you get enough of it together, there's enough nutrition there that, like you said, whales can feed off this plankton and pull all that nutrition in just en masse.
That's amazing. Very cool. And so, yeah, I kind of tipped the answer there, but these would also be used to feed filter feeders. Is that correct? Some of the shellfish you were mentioning?
Yeah, exactly. Filter feeders. Our main use for these copepods are to grow larval fish. So if you think we are trying to produce more and more larval fish in the aquarium, when these things hatch, they're tiny, tiny, tiny. You can't buy that stuff frozen. We have to hatch it ourselves. So we get these tiny, tiny, tiny little organisms that the tiny, tiny, tiny fish are eating to help them grow.
Very cool. Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to the next section here.
Okay. So last up, I thought I would show you, this is our brine shrimp culture. People may be more familiar with sea monkeys. If you've ever done sea monkeys at home, it's exactly the same thing. That's what a sea monkey is. It's a tiny little brine shrimp. So every day we can hatch out this brine shrimp here. We actually have brine shrimp that is 24 hours old, and we have some brine shrimp that's 48 hours old. And believe it or not, there's a significant difference in size between 1 day old and 2 day old. And some of our animals prefer 1 day old brine shrimp, and some of our animals are going to prefer 2 day old brine shrimp.
So let's talk about these brine shrimp for a second here, Chris, just to get an idea of the life cycle of these animals. When we think about animals like fish, they start out as a really small version of themselves, and then they may look a little bit different from when they're adults, and they'll grow up, and they may change their appearance slightly, but they essentially kind of have the same form once they hatch out of a fish egg. Is that what life is like for an animal like a brine shrimp? Are they sort of hatching from an egg? Do they look the same their whole life? Do they change at all?
They change quite a bit. So a shrimp hatches from an egg, like you said, and anybody that's done sea monkeys at home knows you can actually buy these eggs. They're dry and they're dehydrated, and they can stay that way for years.
Wow.
And then when you add them to salt water, they hatch out of that egg as a living shrimp. That shrimp actually will go through several phases of metamorphosis to what some people will be more familiar with, which is an adult brine shrimp. Looks nothing like the baby that comes out. It goes through several different forms as it grows.
That's really cool. And so, like you mentioned, we can keep this culture growing and growing and growing, just like the copepods and the algae, so that we don't have to continually get more of them. We can sort of use them to self-sustain. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we do purchase the cysts.
Okay.
And so we add the cysts every day, and that gets fed
out
every day.
Okay, yeah.
some portion of this at
Yeah.
our Quincy facility. They will actually take this baby brine shrimp and grow it all the way up to the adult stage.
Yeah.
So no longer are we buying adult brine shrimp anymore. We can actually have that grown for us that our folks down in Quincy can send up to the aquarium here.
That's really cool. And I think you guys have been catching along the way. Just like Chris mentioned at the beginning, these systems have the added benefit of being somewhat self-sustaining. We don't need to continue to acquire these animals. We can grow them on site. Chris, I thought it was great that you mentioned all the packaging that we don't have to worry about dealing with in terms of waste. And it really fits with our mission of being able to grow and culture food and animals all in the same building, spend less time collecting things from the ocean so that we have the most minimal impact overall. Wow, that was a really cool trip around the room. Chris, is there anything else cool that you want to mention about the space here?
Yeah, I wanted to show you one really cool thing because I think it fits really well with what you're saying there.
Okay.
So anybody that's worked with brine shrimp know, again, it comes as a dehydrated cyst. So it almost looks like a cinnamon. Like
Okay.
If you think about
Oh,
that.
so that's small. We're talking
Tiny,
about,
tiny, yeah. So for decades, people would hatch the shrimp out. The shrimp hatches out, but you're left with that cyst, like the egg, the hatch. That gets fed off. Unfortunately, what's left of that egg is indigestible to fish. So there are complications with feeding that off. So one way you can deal with that is you can actually use a bleach solution to sort of treat that cyst. And we were doing that for years and years and years. There's a new technology which is really, really, really cool. The eggs themselves are treated with a magnetic coating. And when we run this harvest, every day we run it through a series of magnets.
Whoa.
So everything in here, it's both the cyst, what's left over of the cyst, and the shrimp. And we can actually divide those. So everything we separate out is able to be fed off, and all of the stuff that we don't want is attracted to those magnets. So it's really clean, it's really healthy for our animals, and we're no longer using any chemicals whatsoever to treat their brine shrimp. It's really, really neat.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Wow. What a cool thing to talk about here in this room, right? Yeah. What an amazing space this is, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for taking some time to
Oh,
tour
you're
us
welcome.
around. Hope you guys enjoyed a little behind the scenes insider look at our live food room. If you have any questions, post them in the comments. And stay tuned for more cool virtual visits here to the aquarium.